academic test. So remember, both the listening and speaking sections of the IELTS exam are the same for each of its two versions. This is interesting because both academic and general test takers will have the same version of the listening portion. You can expect the topics presented to vary in subject matter and difficulty. So you'll see some academic listening prompts, you'll hear some general conversations. It will be mixed. This way, everybody has a little bit of their subject matter in the exam. Now, let's go over some important numbers here. You have one chance to hear the listening prompt. You'll hear a total of 4 listening prompts because there are 4 sections, but just remember, it's not going to be played twice. So each section will only be played once. And what I mean by one chance is that you'll have to take good notes and you'll have to understand what is being said the first and only time that you will hear the prompts. You'll have a total of 40 questions and 30 minutes of active listening. So active listening is that you are listening to the information, you are paying attention, and you are taking your notes. 30 minutes of active listening. Now, 10 minutes will be dedicated to transferring your answers to your answer sheet. But if you are taking the computer-based version, you can expect 2 minutes to transfer your answers. So be aware of which type of test you are taking when it comes to your answer transfer time. So here's a nice overview of what to expect generally on the listening portion of the exam. Let's go into more detail about the various sections. So I said there are 4 sections. We'll go through each one in our handy little chart here, and we'll start with what you would start with on the exam, Section 1. So Section 1 will feature a conversation between 2 people. And the topic will be on general subject matter. So this could be a social situation, like for example, booking tickets for a museum. You'll hear 2 people talking about this. Section 2, on the other hand, features a monologue. So only one person will be speaking. Again, though, they'll be speaking about a general subject matter, but here you'll have to listen for details and perhaps even an explanation on something. Again, it's going to be general, so an example could be giving directions to the museum. Okay, so that's Section 1 and Section 2. Both of these feature general subject matter. Section 3, things start to get a bit more abstract, perhaps a bit more difficult. Here you have a conversation with up to 4 people. Now I've listed up to because this doesn't mean you're always going to have 4 people, but you could have up to 4. So you could have 2 people or even 3 people in your conversation. The context here is going to be educational, so it's very important to keep track of your speakers and keep track of what they are saying. An example of this could be discussing course options with a counselor at university or even with a career counselor. It's going to be more on the educational side. And now the last but not least section, Section 4, the notorious section for being the most difficult. It also features a monologue like Section 2, but the subject matter here is abstract and it's very difficult to follow the topic. Now, an example of this could be a portion of a university lecture on dinosaurs or something abstract like this. This is not anything that you would read in the newspaper or magazines, for example. It's definitely more academic in tone and in nature. So just by looking at this chart, I want you to take note that the difficulty increases with each section. So Section 1 is understood to be the easiest, most social and general subject matter, whereas Section 4 is notorious for being the most difficult. This is just based on research and based on the information we have on IELTS. Every test taker is different. So you might find that Section 3 is easiest for you. You might find even that Section 1 is pretty difficult. It depends on what you are interested in, how you have studied, and how you have prepared for this topic. So I would encourage you to do as much practice as you can and understand each section, its difficulties, and even some parts that are perhaps easy for you. Each section has a different strategy, which we'll look at in just a minute. But I want you to keep in mind that Section 1 and Section 3, Section 2 and Section 4 will have the same strategies. So you can think of it as these two, Section 1 and 3, being similar in that they feature conversations, and Section 2 and Section 4 are similar in that they feature monologues. So you'll have to listen for some of the same things, even though the subject matter will be different. Let's take a look at strategy. Okay, so when you are in your sections 1 and section 3, you should be taking notes based on what you hear. Now, I don't mean notes that are lengthy or wordy. I mean notes that will call your attention to keywords, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But these are just notes to spark your memory and help you answer the questions. So, like I said, they're going to be similar in nature because they feature conversations. So the best way to take notes for conversations is to make a column or a chart. This way you can organize your speakers and you can understand who is saying what. Let's look at an example. Okay, here I have a very basic chart. Imagine we are in section 3, so we are listening to up to 4 speakers. In this case, it will be student 1, student 2, and student 3. First off, in this chart, I've written UK, USA, and deep voice. These are some clues, and these will help you stay on track with who is speaking. Think about it. You're going to be listening to a conversation with potentially 4 people, not in your native language, different accents, different speeds, different voices. It would be helpful for you to keep these little notes in terms of accents and what the voice sounds like. So if student 1 has a British accent, I would write UK because it's easy to write, 2 letters, you can do it quickly. And if you find yourself losing track throughout the conversation, you can always remember that this student is the British one, and this is what the student has said and some key ideas in the conversation. Same thing here, student 2, USA. Let's say this person has a North American accent. Maybe student 3 has a difficult accent and you can't really understand what it is. In this case, you can write something else about his or her voice. And in this case, I've written deep voice. This will help you if you find yourself losing track. And then here I've just written some various notes. So for example, once ... sign up for a course. In this case, maybe this student wants to sign up for a course, but I don't want to write any unnecessary words because it's quick and it's fast-paced. So I've written these 3 dots here. Let's say student 2 did not pass psychology last year. These are my abbreviations. I understand them, and that is all that matters. Student 3, deep voice. Let's say he has a meeting with a career counselor in the morning. Okay, again, these are abbreviations. Now, no one is going to be grading your charts or your notes or your columns. No one will be using this except you. That's why you need to understand the abbreviations that you use, the wording, and your symbols here. We will go through this in depth in our individual question type lesson, so I would encourage you to follow that. But keep in mind that the sections of the exam will dictate the type of notes you keep. So for sections 1 and 3, no matter what question type you have, you should focus your notes in an organized fashion similar to this. Also, something to remember is that perhaps in your question type, you'll have to differentiate between key ideas of each speaker. So that's why things like this can really make a difference. Now, sections 2 and 4 will have a different note-taking system. Again, these 2 sections are similar in that they both have monologues, even though the difficulty level and the topics are different. Since these are monologues with only one person speaking, you won't necessarily have to keep track of different speakers. So you should be using the outline method in order to keep track of ideas and key points that the speaker makes. Let's look at an example here. Here I have a basic outline. So let's say this person is talking about booking info. So this would be a topic for section 2. I have something like book info, okay? The main idea could be time. So I see here weekends are closed, mornings open at 12. These are things that make sense to me. And perhaps in your question, you'll have to fill out a form with the hours of operation or perhaps when the museum is closed. And then if the speaker goes on to a different main topic, let's say tours, you can keep note of the different type of tours available. In this case, we could say maybe history tours about World War II or popular culture. You see that I've used some symbols and some abbreviations that, again, make sense to me. Your outline might look a bit different here. It might have fewer words. It might have more words depending on how much you can multitask and how much you can write while you are listening. This will be very important for you, and that's why practice is so important when it comes to listening. And the listening portion is notorious because you only hear each section once. For this reason, it's important to really take notes and actively listen so that you don't miss anything. Again, your sections will really help you understand the type of notes you should be taking. Now, let's start looking at our question types. We're going to look at 6 different question types today, and our first one is going to be the table, summary, note, form, and flowchart completion. Now, these are technically 4 different types of question, but they are all similar in that you have to fill in missing information. The strategy is the same. For the answers, you'll have things like write no more than 3 words for each answer, or write 1 word only. This is just an example, but you see that you'll have to fill in the gaps or write out the answers. Here's an example. Now, this is a notes type of example and a job inquiry. You have an example filled in for you, and then you have your numbers here. And so you see how this says notes, but it's very similar to a table and to a summary. Basically, you have to fill in the missing words. Now, in this case, your writing really has to be clear and organized in order for the examiner to read it. And you'll always be given these specific instructions, so you'll really have to pay attention to this. A lot of students despise this question type because you see here, obviously, if you miss something, you have missed it because it comes in order. So you really have to be on high alert and pay attention. In our lesson for this question type, we'll go over exactly how making an outline alongside your visual aid will help you and how you can stay on track for answering these questions. All right, number 2 is the multiple choice question type. Now, most people are probably very familiar with this question type because it's quite prevalent in the academic setting and in university. So basically, you know, you have to select from options. In the exam, you can have options up until E, so you can have A through E, and you'll have to use process of elimination here. So let's look at an example. You see 17 and 18, you have options from A to C in this case. And if you are listening and you know that A is absolutely not the correct answer, you can eliminate it quickly and then choose between B and C, and then eliminate C, and perhaps you are left with B. So this process of elimination will really help you eliminate the answers that are definitely not correct. And even in cases where you're not completely sure of the answer, you can guess, give your best guess, which is better than nothing. If you see here, number 19 and 20, you have to choose between 5 options, so A through E, but you need to choose 2 letters. So you'll see 2 types of questions in the multiple choice questions, either choosing 1 correct option or 2. So always be on the lookout for that. In our lesson for multiple choice, we will go over process of elimination and understanding all of these keywords and options and questions. So be sure to check out that lesson as well. Third, we have the plan, map, diagram completion. Think of this as sort of similar to question type number 1, the summary and note and flowchart completion, because you will have a visual aid. The only difference here is that you'll have to label or detail information. So here is an example of a diagram. You see a visual aid, some sort of photo, looks like a water heater, and you'll have these labels, so A through E. And based on what the speaker is telling you in the listening prompt, you'll have to use perhaps some direction words, left, right, to fill in the correct parts here. Notice that you don't have to write it, you just have to write in your letter in this case. If you have a map, the speaker may be talking about how to get around a museum. If you have a plan, it could be similar to a housing complex where you're looking at various parts of a house or some other building. So just be prepared to work alongside a visual aid. And this takes some strategy, which we go over in our specific lesson for this. Question type number 4 is the short answer. This is something I hear a lot of complaints about because students need to actually write the answers. And a lot of students think that they are just writing the answers out of thin air, but that's not the case. You are listening for these key words, so the words that you'll be writing in the listening prompt. So you never have to just create an answer. You will hear the words. And so it's very important to pay attention to your key words when you're listening to the listening prompt. Now, here's an example of this. Again, you will see instructions similar to what I have here, or you could also see something with up to 1 word or no more than 2 words. You'll have to pay a lot of attention to what is written. But you see that question words will be very important here. So how and how often and how much and how. So in our lesson for short answer questions, we go over specific strategy on dealing with question words and using those to your advantage. All right, almost finished with our question types. This one we have sentence completion, which is considered to be a bit easier than the short answer because here you have to fill in the gap and the context is given to you. So here's an example of that context. You see the sentence with a gap right here. Usually the gap is at the end of the sentence, but you may very well see a gap in the middle of the sentence like we do here. And again, you'll have to make sure that you're reading your instructions. For example, this one says 1 word only, so really keep that in mind. Now, on a different note, here you'll have to understand the grammar. So instead of focusing on question words, in this lesson we focus on grammar and making sure that you're writing the correct word in the gap. Knowing the grammar, so whether you have to write a noun or an adjective or a verb, can really help you save on time and maximize your chances of getting the correct answer. Last but not least, we have the matching question types, and it's very self-explanatory. You'll have to match answers to features or questions. Now, here's an example. You may be thinking that this looks quite similar to the reading question of matching features, and you would not be wrong. It is quite similar, but you'll have to adapt your strategy to fit in with listening, because obviously we don't have anything to read here, so we'll have to find key words in our features and make sure that we are listening for these words. In our lesson, we go over all the strategy that pertains to this question type, especially looking at the differences between the questions on the easier side and the questions on the more difficult side. What I mean by that is, if you look here, you have questions 14 to 18. So that's 5 questions. But here you have 7 locations. It doesn't say that the location can be used once. So this is actually quite difficult because you're not able to eliminate anything. There are some questions where you may be able to eliminate the features, making it a bit easier and allowing you to use process of elimination. But most questions are a bit difficult, and we should always prepare for the most difficult scenarios. All right, so those were our 6 question types. I would encourage you to watch our individual videos because we really go in depth and give you a step-by-step example for each one. Let's quickly go over the scoring. There isn't that much to say about scoring, just that there are your correct answers on the left-hand side of this table and the corresponding band score on the right-hand side. Now, this is from IELTS. We don't know the exact formula of their scoring in general for the entire exam, but if you practice at home and you get 35 questions correct, for example, you can put yourself at a band 8. And these correct answers correspond to the answers that you get correct. Remember, the scoring in the IELTS exam will not penalize you for incorrect answers. That's why you should always write something in your answer sheet, even if you're not sure if it's correct. So that would be using process of elimination for your best guess, or writing in the most plausible words for any of the short answer or sentence completion question types. You never want to leave it blank. You always want to give yourself your best chance with a best guess, even if it's quite difficult. So keep this table handy and refer to it while you're practicing. All right, so we have gone over the various sections, the 6 question types, and now I want to give you a general strategy and a guide that you can use for the listening exam. Now, each question type and section has their own strategy. And so you'll have to tweak this general strategy for each specific question type. Again, you can find the detailed strategy and the personalized strategy for each question type in our specific videos, but this will just prepare you for what to expect. Now, with any question type or with any section in a listening exam, the first thing you always want to do is read the questions or the information in the exam. Now, before you hear the listening prompt, you will have around 20 seconds to do this. People might be thinking, 20 seconds isn't that much time. And it isn't, okay? It is less than half a minute, but you cannot just sit back and relax. This is the worst thing you can do. You really have to utilize these 20 seconds and prepare yourself to do as much preparation work as you can before you hear that prompt. So the first thing you want to do quickly is read your questions and the information presented to you. You never want to listen blindly, just like you would never want to read blindly in the reading portion of the exam. You want to prepare yourself for what you're about to hear. And the best way to do that is to read the questions or the information on your sheet. And now with time and practice, you should be able to combine these 2 steps. So as you're reading the questions, you should also be underlining your key words. I cannot stress this enough. Key words are present in the listening prompt, in your questions, in your information. In order not to listen blindly, you have to know what you're listening for. And that is where the keywords come in. So you might be thinking, what are keywords? Basically, these are the important words that will call out your attention while you're listening. So think of keywords this way. If you were to eliminate these words from the question or the answer options, you would be eliminating the main idea and leaving out all of the unnecessary information. This is very similar to the reading, and we go over strategies for finding keywords and explaining what they are more in depth in our individual videos for each question type. Now, this is usually the preparation work. As you are listening, you should be taking notes, and this is again based on your section. So remember, sections 1 and 3 have a specific strategy with an outline format, and sections 2 and 4 have a specific strategy with charts and columns. Again, we're not expecting you to write a novel in these notes, but you should be writing your keywords and seeing how they fit with your questions and your answers. And overall, you just want to be accurate, whether you are writing letters for multiple choice or whether you're writing 3 words or 1 word only. Make sure you are really clear on the directions and that you know exactly what you have to do. It would be a shame if you were to get something incorrect just because you wrote 1 extra word or because you transferred the incorrect letter on your answer sheet. So just make sure that you're as accurate as possible. All right, so we've gone over the main ideas, the scoring, the question types, the sections, the general strategy. You're almost ready to look at our detailed videos for each question type, But before we do that, I just want to leave you with a few tips and tricks that you should always remember when it comes to listening. The first thing is prepare, prepare, prepare. Now, in our individual videos, we'll talk about how synonyms are important, how question words are important, and how direction words are important. Vocabulary is key for the listening section, especially the understanding of this vocabulary and how to apply it, because you won't be reading, you'll be listening. So you'll have to be aware of synonyms. For example, hungry and starving, these are synonyms, and it's very likely that you would see hungry on your sheet and you would hear starving in the prompt. So the test will examine how well you can cope with different synonyms. Question words are particularly important in the short answer and sentence completion question types. So how, what, where. And also direction words will be pertinent to the diagram or even the map question types. So left or north or south or southeast. These are all things you will have to prepare. So the best way to do this is to make sure you're confident with the material and practice it well before test day. Secondly, you'll want to use your active listening skills. What is an active listening skill? Basically, it means your brain is switched on and you are focused on what you are listening to. If you think of passive listening, this is more of what you would do when you are on your sofa on a Saturday evening watching a film. So they're very different skills, and unfortunately, active listening skills are a bit more difficult, but you'll need them for this exam. A lot of students think that they can just watch a couple of films in English, perhaps with subtitles, and that'll be a great preparation tool. It isn't a bad preparation tool, but it's not really similar to the situation that you'll be faced with on test day. So I would encourage you to really do a ton of practice exams, perhaps even listen to podcasts or specific IELTS preparation videos and tools, similar to what we have on our website, which I'll give you at the end of this video, but really focus on your active listening skills for this exam. Third, you'll want to use your time wisely. In this case, I'm talking more about your time on test day. So really utilize the time you have, the 20 seconds, to read your information and prepare yourself. You do not want to be sitting back and relaxing. Remember, this is only 30 minutes of active listening, more or less. So for 30 minutes of the listening section on the IELTS exam on your test day, you really need to focus and use your time to the best of your ability and be a star active listener. Fourth, make sure you can multitask efficiently. This is something we will go into in detail in our specific videos, but you don't want to just be listening without taking notes. Again, you don't have to write a novel, but you should be making notes of your keywords as you listen to each speaker and as you listen to the different prompts. You should be using process of elimination, so eliminating various answers with ticks. If you have multiple choice, for example, you should be doing this as you are listening to the speaker in order to, again, use your time wisely. And then keep your ears open. Now, I mean this during test day, but also beforehand. This goes hand in hand with the active listening skills. Really listen to anything you can. Just make sure that you are being active about it. So for example, if you are listening to a podcast or if you're watching a television show in English, have a goal for yourself where you say, for example, okay, after this podcast, I'm going to give a 5-minute discussion about what I heard, or I'm going to give a 2-minute speech about what the television show was about. Even if you're only speaking to yourself, you will be listening in a more active way. And last but not least, practice makes perfect. So even if your first practice test for the listening section is just horrible and you didn't do as well as you'd hoped, don't worry. It's a difficult portion of the exam. You're listening to something that is not your native language, and speakers have various accents with different paces.